us in this second WBS Leadership Dialogues. We've been running these dialogues now for the last 2 years, and they've been very fruitful and beneficial. But more importantly, as I always say when I open these dialogues are aimed at solving problems rather than complaining and moaning about the situation that our country is in. Let's look at how we can contribute towards resolving all the challenges that we are facing. And that's the purpose of these dialogues. And that's why we invite people who have made contribution and are actually actively involved in resolving the challenges we're facing in our nation. I'm really pleased today because I'm introducing, I call him Sis Judy, but his official title, Dr. Judy Dlamini. And I normally read this one because I think it's important for us to read, particularly CVs that inspires young people and young leaders. Group. He holds a number of degrees. One is the MBCHB, and then business school. That one I'll emphasize where you got it. DBL, and then Stanford Innovation Entrepreneurship Certificate, and postgraduate PGCE at Wits. Judy is a medical doctor, but also a doctor of business leadership, and an entrepreneur, an author, and a philanthropist. After practicing as a medical family practitioner for many years, she specialized in occupational health, consulted for different companies, and her MBA from Wits University enabled her to change careers. Her doctoral thesis investigated the impact, this is important, of the intersection of race, gender, and social class in women's leadership career progression and strategies for gender transformation. Using grounded theory and life stories, she converted her thesis to a book titled Equal But Different. It is a bestseller. I recommend that you read that book. She's also a founder and a chairman of Mbekani Group and has been in business for 27 years. She's a non-executive director of the SASME Fund, an initiative between government and private sector to create jobs. She also chairs the Wits Donald Medical Center and is the Chancellor of our university. I'd like to thank Dr. Judy Dlamini as our Chancellor to come and join us here at WBS as our alumni also. And we're going to have a great session. And let me also introduce Professor Mills. Professor Mills is a professor of strategy here at WBS, but he also is a director of partnership and stakeholder engagement with all institutions, global institutions, and also employers. He's a member of the executive committee of WBS, and he's done a sterling job in running these WBS Leadership Dialogues. I will hand over to Professor Mills, who will take us through this conversation. Thank you very much, Prof. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Prof. Maurice Khadebe, Director, Wits Business School. I would like to welcome Dr. Dlamini. Very warm welcome to you to Wits Business School, your alma mater. We are very pleased that you're able to join us today to talk about your leadership journey and business. To kick off our conversation, I'd like to talk about your childhood, and your upbringing. You were born in Westfield, near Durban, eThekwini.
Yes.
eThekwini, yeah. What are your memories of growing up, Dr. Judy?
Thanks very much first to Prof. Khadebe for that very kind introduction. And thanks, Prof. Mills. Yeah, it's an honor to be here, my alma mater. There's something that just talks to my soul when we say eThekwini in my language. There are so many memories that come to mind, but I think the ones that I always think about, and I think it grounds me, is the one where I would be sitting on my father's lap, and though we had electricity, we also had a stove, what is it? A coal stove, welcome door. Yeah, those that are my age know about the welcome Dover, and he would be sipping tea and telling us stories. You know, when I talk about fireside chats, it takes me back to that, my father's lab. But also just the time that I was born in, you know, it was dark days of apartheid. And I was born in a white suburbs, what tend to be a white suburb. So yeah, there are those memories too. The nice, loving environment inside the house, but once you got out, the environment wasn't welcoming. And as a child, it didn't make sense why you are a non-entity in your own country. So yeah, it's mixed emotions that come back. But the beauty is that even the negative reinforcement made me the person that I am today.
Yeah. So I just want to talk about your parents, your late parents, Rita and Thomas Dlamini. They played a very critical role in influencing your outlook on life. Your mother was a primary school teacher, and your father was an entrepreneur. Can you please just tell us about them and how they shaped your personal development?
Yeah, it's very interesting because it's always, hindsight is always a 20/20 vision, because you don't realize the impact of your parents and your siblings as you're growing up. It's only when you are dealing with life that you realize that, wow, this is why I do it this way. It's because of that lesson that I learned. And most of those lessons are really not so much what is told, but what's done and you observe. Like my mother, both my parents were very industrious people, they were not big on complaining. They just got on with it. They were hustlers, I would like to say. We came from a working class, I would like to believe, but we had everything we needed as kids, because they had these different streams of income. My mother was a primary school teacher, but she would take snacks to sell at school. She had a sewing machine. She would make petticoats and kiddies' clothes that she would sell over the weekend. My dad actually owned property in the few places where Blacks were allowed to own property at the time. And he built flats there. And by flats, I mean just rooms, very humble rooms that he rented out, and he made money out of that. And he also ran a tuck shop over the weekends. And I worked at the tuck shop. I guess it's child labor. So I grew up watching these two people hard at work all the time. I don't remember a time when my mother wasn't doing something with her hands. The only time would be when she was reading Women's Weekly that was available those days. Yeah, so the work ethic that I have comes from them, and also just being a hustler. I always call myself a hustler because that's what I am, really.
Yeah. Dr. Judy, as early as we were 4 years of age, and you had decided you wanted to become a medical doctor as early as that, and this is a dream that subsequently you're able to fulfill. Why did you choose to study to become a medical doctor, and what sparked your interest in the medical profession?
It's very interesting because before I interviewed the women for my book and my thesis, I thought everyone was like that. I thought everyone knew when they were 4 what they wanted to become. And what happened in my life is that the nanny that, took care of us when we were kids walked out on my mother. So at the age of 4, she had to take me to school with her. And what I was supposed to do is to play, but I got into this class. I found the whole thing interesting. I actually became one of the students there, or pupils, whatever you call them these days. And one of these days, because they didn't really take it seriously that I'm in grade, it was sub A, I think. So my dad wasn't well. So my mom said, you're not going to school. You'll just watch over your dad. A doctor will come to see him. Just make sure that whatever the doctor says, you assist with, right? So I remained behind, and Dr. Kabashe, may his soul rest in peace, arrives in his beautiful Jaguar, and he looks very, very sharp, And don't forget that this is in Westville. So the people I see when I walk from home to the bus stop are people who are working in the garden, they are home housekeepers. So they don't inspire you that, I want to grow up and be this person, because you can see it looks more like slavery. And all of a sudden there's this guy. He's a doctor. He drives a beautiful car, and he made my dad get well. I was like, okay, I'm going to be this guy. So that is what inspired me, because I saw someone who looks like me doing great things and looking good. I always wanted to, I loved beautiful things. I loved success.
Yeah. To our audience, members of the audience, so we will give you a chance to ask questions. And if you have a question, you punch it into the chat box, and I'll relate it to Dr. Judy Dlamini, Chancellor of the University of the Witwatersrand, as well as the founder of the Mbekani Group. We'll talk about that later, the founder and chairperson of the Mbekani Group. So now I want to talk to you about your education. You studied medicine, you became a medical doctor, but over time you decided to venture into business, and that's what you influenced your decision to study in business disciplines. You started with an MBA here at Wits Business School, MBA, and then later you did a doctorate in business leadership at UNISA. Why did you decide to do the MBA here, and how did it change your life? What was it like for you to be here at Wits Business School, where you completed your MBA, and in 1999 you completed your MBA in 1999, and then you went on to do your doctorate in business leadership. But we can talk about that later. Firstly, why did you decide to do the MBA? What was it like doing it, and how did it change your life?
It was very interesting, Prof. Mills. We moved from Durban, born and raised in Durban, but we moved in '98 because my husband got a job in Pretoria. So I was already looking at studying towards an MBA. And why an MBA? Because already I was actually juggling, running my practice and also running a bakery. And I was quite keen to go full-time into business for many reasons. And I've always believed that you actually need to be qualified to do what you do. You can hustle, but then you actually need to understand, why do things happen this way as opposed to that way? And those days we were putting deals together because of the advent of BEE. And I just needed to understand what really the drivers of business. So that's why I did an MBA. And I chose Wits because it was the best business school in the country. And it was quite interesting though, Prof, because as you can imagine, I studied at University of Natal, Black section, right? And everyone in my class looked like me. I went and practiced in the township. Everyone I treated looked like me. So I'd never studied with people, white citizens of this country. And it was 4 years post-independence. So there were some cultural shocks around that, in the sense that we were not looking at the country and independence in the same light, understandably so. One, two, I was a medical doctor. I've actually only engaged with other medical doctors, you know, and here I was in class. There were engineers, there were CAs, at least there was a CA at home, so I understood that thinking. But there were so many different professions, and that was so inspiring and empowering, actually, because I then realized that different professionals think differently, because the way we are trained influences how we view the world and also how we solve problems. For me, that was one of the greatest things. And of course, as you know already, those days we're doing case studies where you actually found yourself in someone's business and tried to solve a problem that seemed to be going on. And yeah, it was that 18 months was like a lifetime in terms of the empowerment. And it really changed my life. So the job that I got, first job I had at 40, was in an investment bank. And obviously that was it was another cultural shock to have a boss who's younger than yourself, and also investment banking. So yeah, I always thank WBS for opening the world to me.
Yeah. You know, the transition, Dr. Judy, from the medical profession into business, how did you navigate that? You know, I mean, you have already told us about the shock and the surprise and so on in the MBA class, but overall, you know, how did you navigate that? Because it's, for some people, that is a difficult thing to move from one profession to, you know, how do you navigate that?
You know, it's difficult. And because I was very deliberate about the change, one, I also learned humility. I learned that when you find yourself outside your comfort zone, you need to be humble. It doesn't matter how much, how old you are, and whether you've been your boss previously. Right now, you are not your own boss. You have a boss. And you work hard, you know. So humble yourself to learn from people younger than yourself and work harder than everybody else, you know. So I was that person who would come first and leave last, because I had to prove myself, you know. Especially, it became, I felt like being a doctor was a stigma, you know. I remember there were days where I felt like I wish I had done BA music, you know, because then people understand your versatility and your adaptability. When you're a doctor, they think, okay, there's a box, there's penicillin, there's Panado, you belong there, you know. So I had a lot to prove that, you know, I'm more than just one profession. So it was challenging but fun. I discovered things I didn't know about myself.
And then, so you completed your MBA here, for which we are grateful.
I'm grateful.
You know, we're very proud of you. Now, you went on to, you know, you have this abiding love for education. So you went on to pursue a doctorate in business leadership. And you know, this you completed in 2014. And I read your book. I have it in my bag here. Let me get me your book.
Okay.
Yeah. So I read your book.
Thank you.
To be kindly so fascinating, you know, and it served as a basis. You know, your doctoral research served as a basis, your thesis for this book, which is called Equal but Different Women's Leaders, Life Stories over Race, Gender, and Social Class. So the book, amongst other things, it's a wide-ranging book, but amongst other things, it examines why leadership positions and boardrooms are still predominantly occupied by men. Now, I've had other guests here previously. We've had other guests, and we've really harped on this theme about gender inclusivity and in the corporate world. And since the book was published, this was in 2015, the appalling state of affairs in the corporate boardrooms that you eloquently dissect in the book has not changed. It's changed a little bit, but substantively it has not changed. So from your perspective, what accounts for this state of affairs in the corporate world? And what, in your view, ought to be done to advance gender equality in the workplace?
Prof. Mills, my observation is that we undermine the lengths people will go to retain supremacy at the expense of everything else. You'll have studies done by different scholars that tell you why diversity matters, inclusive diversity matters, but people still go ahead and exclude others. And in my mind, it's just the nature of privilege, when you own privilege, you actually would rather the organization suffers as long as your privilege is retained. That is the starting point. For those that have been in business know that, yes, we have these beautiful laws, the BBBE, the employment equity, you name them. But as I say, you'll sit in a board where you actually have a consultant who tells you how to comply. So until we accept and it becomes part of our DNA that for any sustainable growth in the economy, anywhere in the world, starting with our country, we need to embrace diversity and inclusivity before it can happen, right? And then we will look at the laws differently. We will see them as the minimum. We will actually say, our job is to empower every person who is here, because the challenge with being exclusive, the challenge of bringing numbers, which is what we do, bringing numbers and working so hard to show why they failed, we actually enable people to be the best versions of themselves. And they won't be the best versions of themselves unless you empower them. You give them the power to excel and the tools that they need. We don't do that yet.
But how do we resolve this? How do we address this from your perspective? You've held a string of positions on boards and chaired boards, so you are well attuned to the dynamics in the corporate world. How do we address this challenge?
I really believe, Prof. Mills, that each one of us that find themselves in a leadership position have an obligation to make the change that they want to see. And the question then would be, okay, nice talk, what have you done? When I started my company as a starting point, I only employed women, not because I had anything against men, but I wanted to prove to myself and the women that we can do it. And we did. It only changed after 5 years where I was like, okay, we've shown to ourselves that you can do it. 1, 2, when I sat on boards, I would be the first one to look around the room and say, I can't be the only woman in the room. I need to get another woman in the room. And I would be the first one to say, if we are looking to diversify the board, if we are looking to diversify the executive, then we'll only interview that social demographic that we want to employ, right? Because I had learned that people will use all sorts of prejudice to exclude people But if you say, we're looking for a Black man or we're looking for a Black woman, guess what? We'll only interview that demographic. And you'd be surprised at how much talent exists in the country, because talent in this country exists in all social demographics. And then they'll ask you the question, oh, I didn't know you had such great people. Where did you find them? You look for them. They're there, you know? So we need critical mass, in short. So that's why wherever I go, whatever position I have, even if it's just a ceremonial role, I know my responsibility. Female Academic Leaders Fellowship is just about that. Because when Prof. Radebe introduced our webinar, he said, we talk about solutions. And I love solutions because instead of complaining, you do something, you know? So you empower people that are hungry to be empowered. You find out from them what they need, what tools they need. You provide those tools. You work with them for them to have the visibility that they need and access to leadership that is so important. So I guess then the challenge is with each and every one of us, because there's an element amongst leaders, even those leaders that know what's right, not doing it because they expect the next person to do it. You do it yourself and stop complaining. Do something where you are.
Yes, yes. You mentioned the program that you're running at Wits University in terms of advancing the development of female academics. We'll come to that later. So we'll have a piece about your role at Wits University. What I would like to talk about now is, and I would like to invite members of the audience, if you have a question or a comment to make, please type it in the chat box. I'll relay that to Dr. Judy Dlamini, Chancellor of the University of the Witwatersrand, as well as the founder and chairperson of the Mbekani Group. Let's talk about Mbekani. You know, I went to your website, and a fascinating group of companies that you established, the Mbekani Group, and which straddles a range of sectors, economic sectors, including surgical equipment, facilities management, security, commercial property, and luxury fashion retail. Why did you establish this group of companies, and what do you seek to achieve through these companies?
A couple of things. One of them, you remember, if you go back to my childhood, my parents had multiple streams of income.
Yeah.
And they had property. So in my group of companies, there had to be property. Excuse me, because that's one of the things my dad taught me, that you need property because property appreciates. And it actually gives you returns as it appreciates. So you actually, it's a win-win scenario. So I look at one, property, because of what I've said, but also I'm a medical doctor. So it was important for me to play in the health sector. So we are one of the 6 companies that signed a public-private partnership with government at Inkosi Albert Lutuli Hospital, and we run central services and TSU, and we also run facilities management with other partners. So I try to use everything I've learned and everything I know to actually make an income out of it. And in terms of fashion retail, I sold that business 4 years ago now. Time flies. But I learned a lot through that business. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the area of creatives. You know, creative people, I'd never worked with them before, but it was such a it was actually quite empowering to understand how they work, how their minds work. So these different companies helped me to, one, empower especially women, have multiple revenue streams, but also just the richness of understanding the different sectors. What I've done over the past years, I've digressed and actually diversified more into multi-family office. And the reason for that is that I'm finding myself more investing in philanthropy rather than making money. So, and yet I know I need more money to invest in philanthropy, but also to have a comfortable retirement. So through the multi-office, I'm able to invest in venture capital, private equity, and of course, listed entities here and abroad. So it's much more diverse than the operations themselves.
It's coming through, Dr. Judy. Somebody who asked in, is this Asha Mutsweni? I wanted advice. She says, wow, Dr. Judy Dlamini's got sent. I was stuck between doing permanent work experience. I have to start with PDM, which is our one of our flagship programs here. And it says, I wanted advice on which MBA to specialize in that has a great market gap between dynamic economies and innovation, managing for sustainability, finance, leading organizations in a complex environment, and general management. But essentially, Dr. Judy, so Ashela, she doesn't have enough work experience to embark on an MBA. But she's very keen to pursue the path that you follow. So she wants to start with the PDM program. What kind of advice would you give to her?
Hi, Esla, and thanks for that question. It depends. And you learn that when you get to business school. The first way to answer any question is that it depends, because the context determines the answer. You have MPCHB and you want to venture out. It depends what you want to venture out to. Let me just see the options that you put. You put managing for sustainability, finance, leading organizations, general management. Now, the PDM is going to prepare you for an MBA, which is great, because you'll actually have exposure to so many different disciplines that are all important when it comes to business. Whether you go to finance depends on what you want to do with your MBA. Do you want to start your own business? Do you want to work for the corporate? Because if you want to work for the corporate, you can go for leading organizations in a complex environment. You can go for general management. But if you ask me, based on what I know, but then always have a caveat, because I did my MBA in 1999, a lot has changed since. I would think back then, I would have chosen the finance one, simply because I wanted to understand finances, because, as you know, for medical qualified people, we don't learn anything about finance. So look for that area where you are weak and choose that, because that's the muscle that you want to grow. So it really depends on your context. Where are you weak and what are you solving for?
All right. There's another question, Dr. Judy, Chancellor Nozipho Mabuza. Dr. Dlamini, what has been the biggest challenge you have faced thus far as a Black woman in leadership, and how have you overcome it?
Thanks for that question, Nozipho. It's an ongoing journey, being Black and being a woman. It doesn't matter how much qualifications you have and experience. There's always that thing. When you show up with the disadvantage of being Black and a woman. But I think how I've overcome those challenges is believing in myself. There are two things that I truly believe change the way you see the world and how people see you. Investing in yourself and being a lifelong learner. I cannot emphasize that more, because when you invest in yourself, when you learn all the time, you are not threatened by someone who undermines you, because no one knows it all. You might not know this, but you learn it. And so you won't be undermined. The second thing is believing in yourself even when you don't, because it matters. How you show up, how you raise your voice in a decent, professional way, but family matters. And I do believe that over time, people learn to respect you for what you bring to the table. And over time, your color and your gender becomes as a side thing. What matters is, I wonder how she can assist in this challenge. The first entry is those social identities of disadvantage. You show up, you deliver, then people respect you. So you will have to work harder, you have to do more, but you know what? It's doable. Over time, people will respect you for what we deliver.
Yeah. There's a flurry of comments and questions here. Dr. Judy Dlamini, let me just go back here. Okay, let me just go back here. I want to capture all this. She says, I love what Dr. Judy said. We should not box ourselves. I can attest to that. I moved from health to business. I studied health sciences at Wits, then old PDM in 2016, recently completed my MPhil and now working in the banking space.
Oh,
all right.
wow.
Okay, yeah. And as a question, I think the comments are useful just so, but I'm more interested now in questions. So what are some of the things, this is Nico, what are some of the things you consider when deciding which business industry to pivot into and when?
It's funny, thanks for that question, Nico. It's funny that we think there's a lot of planning in life. And yet, yes, there is some planning, but there's also some things that are outside your control. And I always say, being in the right place at the right time, prepared, is sometimes what matters. So the key there is being prepared, and also always be in the lookout, because business deals don't come shouting that I'm a great deal, but always be on the lookout, always do some analysis, always do your homework. And then this is the other thing. People will say, how do you invest in something you know nothing about? You are not born knowing anything. You invest in people who know something. You invest in getting the knowledge where it matters. So in theory, you would say, what are the businesses of the future? It's water, it's renewable energy. Yes, but other businesses too, like food, will always eat, So it's about what you're looking for, what's available at the time, and what does it take? Is it you don't want to overpay, for instance? Getting a good deal at a good price is number one. If you understand the industry, even better. But if you don't, get people that do. So there's too many dynamics for a definitive answer. So the real answer, as far as I'm concerned, is always be prepared, be adaptable, and be on the lookout for deals. And if you find gaps in what you know, close those gaps with knowledge, but also close those gaps with people that know.
Yeah. there are more questions which will come to, some of which converge with the questions I'll ask you. To go back to the Mbekani Group, Dr. Judy, one of the key areas now that we're all concerned with is the issue of innovation, innovation and how we deal with innovation. And I'm interested in understanding your perspective on this, and in terms of how innovation is a core, a driver of growth and performance in your organization. How do you use innovation to be a core driver of growth and performance within the Mbekani Group? How much does it matter to you and as an organization, and how do you deal with it?
It's interesting because people talk about technology, how it will replace people and so forth. But I truly believe that the strength of any institution, for profit, not for profit, is its people. So at Mbekani, we invest in people. Innovation is going to come through people. So you invest in them, you empower them, so that it doesn't matter what job title you have within the organization. We care for you. And if you want to study further, we will pay for it and we invest in you. If you have an idea, it's taken on board. So I think it's important, therefore, that we invest in our people and we co-create with them, because no one person knows it all. It matters to get people around the table that think differently, that have different strengths, but more importantly, take those on board when you decide on the way to the future for the organization.
Yeah, and the other thing, while I was doing some research on your organization and your career, Dr. Judy, I got a sense that you feel very strongly about the importance of Africans determining their destiny. Identifying the problems that they face and addressing those problems themselves, whether it's in business or it's in politics, or and I just want to quote here. You said, you strongly advocate Africanness, foregrounding African issues and solutions, and elevating Africa to the world stage. Could you please elaborate on this assertion? Why is this important, and what do you mean by this?
Prof. Mills, everything I am has been inspired by someone who looks like me, being it. Yeah. And I truly believe that if you look at the country and you look at the world, as a continent, we're still not seen as the it continent. In spite of many brilliant leaders that are not in the limelight, we have them. Prof. Bongan Mayosi, not many people know about him, but he was brilliant. He made systemic institutional change that will be with us for life. He might be gone, but everyone that he empowered is actually carrying his legacy. So why do I say this? One of the things I believe strongly about is telling the African stories of success, because I want those that follow after me, and even those that don't have access to these people, to access them through books. That is one. So I am very, how do I say this? I resent telling us what we're not. I resent making Blackness equal to inferiority, because it's not. So Africanness means owning who you are, excel at every point, because everyone else expects you not to, but it's within you to excel, and you can, and people have. And also telling the beautiful African story. And the late Dr. Vuyo Mahlati, when you read the book, she talks about, you know, when we get to these boardrooms, because Blackness is perceived to be less, we don't own who we are. And we bring something to the boardroom that no one else has, or more often than not. Your experience in the township, the market that the business might be trying to get to, your experience from your rural area, own it. And don't be shy to actually express your viewpoint, your perspective from your exposure to the township. So I'm asking us to own everything that we are. Don't look down upon some of the aspects of Blackness as perceived by those that would like us to believe that Black is being inferior. So in a nutshell, just own it and excel.
Yeah, yeah. Dr. Judy, you know, you have a massive base. Did you know that?
Come again?
A lot of people writing. We have a massive fan base. You know, there's a lot of people are writing.
Oh.
And you know,
that's kind.
All right, and some of the comments and questions, you know, they converge. What I want to, now I'm moving on to your role at Wits University, where you are, you know, you're elected as chancellor recently, where they've never heard of the concept of a chancellor. I assume that every country has a chancellor and a vice chancellor. They said, no, we don't know. So perhaps, you know, if you may, just explain what being a chancellor, you know, in a university means, being a university chancellor. What is it about? What do you do as a university chancellor? And also, just the, you know, your broader view, you know, of your tenure so far. You know, you've been in this position here at Wits since 2018, and has it been good? You know, it's been a waste of time for you. That's the last.
Well, interesting questions. And
Yeah.
I have to share this. When I got inaugurated 1st December 2018, I had some of my aunts from my husband's family that attended. They've since gone, may their souls rest in peace. And one of them was a school teacher during her days. So she's like, so Judy mntanam, yini kuba chancellor? We principal. So people get confused with this role, actually. It's a ceremonial role, Prof. Mills, as you know. It really is about being in alignment with the moral values of the institution, one, being available when you are requested for guidance, and also just flying the flag high, you know, because as you know, as universities, we depend quite a bit on funding from donors, you know, so sometimes you find yourself playing that role to assist the executives that have the job to do that. Because it's a non-paying job, it's a ceremonial role, but there's alignment in the success of the organization. So that is the chancellor's role. And it really depends on who needs you and what they need you for. You might find someone, not necessarily the vice chancellor, someone who's a fundraiser asking you to do this and you do it if you can, and so forth. So what happens though, is that any leadership role, and I always say this, especially to young people, just because your role actually is ceremonial, it doesn't remove the responsibility to lead. And what do I mean by that? When you are in a country where there is challenges when it comes to leadership, where women are not represented where it matters, it's your job to do something. And as I said, that's how FALF was born, because in 2019, I said, trying to grapple with understanding this role, you know, I was like, okay, let me understand this organization called WITS. And part of understanding an organization is looking at its people. So how are we doing when it comes to professors, heads of schools, deans of faculties? And what became quite blatant is just how Black women don't show up in those positions. And it's unconscious, it's a blind spot, if you like, because WITS has been at transformation for more than a decade. So WITS is very alive to transformation. But what hasn't been the issue, in my view, is using an intersectional lens when you look at transformation. Because those people that don't have any social identity of privilege get left behind. Men have gender privilege. White women have race privilege. I don't have any social identity of privilege. So I tend to get neglected because the positions and the empowerment takes those people first before I am actually considered. So it's my role as the underdog in a position to do something, hence the birth of FALF. How has my time been? It's been amazing. It truly has been amazing. In spite of the, what do you call it, COVID, you may not know that I also decided to study as a teacher. So WITS is the only university.
I did hear somewhere.
So WITS is the only university where I've gone twice, and then GCE. And I actually observed firsthand the change from going to class, which was only for 3 months, part-time, to blended, actually full-time online. And that was amazing, the way it was done. In the short time that I've been the chancellor, I've actually been there through 2 VCs. I started with Prof. Adam Habib, and then now it's Prof. Zeblon Vilagazi. And it's been seamless. The change has been seamless. Yeah. So yeah, it's been an honor to serve. You know, leadership is about serving. It doesn't matter at what level, you know.
Yeah. So, Dr. Judy, there's a question which I would like you to deal with from Vuyo. So you spoke about, the Female Academic Leadership Fellowship Program, which you started at WITS University, but we also have the at school level, the Future Nation Schools Program, right? So he's very interested. I don't know if he's a man or woman, but Vuyo wants to open my own easily accessible schools with a key focus at the foundation phase level and grow from there. How did you start the Future Nation Schools? I want my schools to be accessible and provide good quality education in the foundation phase.
Okay. We started by doing research for 2 years. My husband and I went through the whole world, different continents, to just look at different models when it comes to teaching pedagogy, you know, and the one that we came up with is project-based learning, because the challenge that we found with our system was just how it doesn't prepare our students with thinking tools, having the confidence and the thinking tools to start their own businesses. They'll take these subjects that don't lead them to any place that will give them the power to start their own thing, and they'll look for a job, and they'll have a degree but not have a job. So we wanted a system that will make them believe and give them the power to start their own thing, and also just be comfortable in their own skin. So that was a 2-year journey, and we started in 2017. It's a lot of money that you have to invest. It is a lot of money. I'm not going to lie to you. And obviously, depending on your model, and we then had to train the teachers in the model, because it's one thing to have this pedagogy that you think is going to work, but then the instrument to deliver that is the teacher. And the core of education is a teacher. That's why my husband and I then studied PGCE to understand where are the gaps in the training of the teachers because of some of the challenges that we encountered. So one of the things that we did, the model that we tweaked came from schools in San Diego. So we took a few of our teachers there to immerse them in understanding how this is taught, and also just nourish the pedagogy that the training that they had received, which didn't prepare them adequately for what we're asking them to do. And after that, they train others that we employ. So do your homework. Do your homework is all I'm saying.
All right. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I've got to ask you this question. You know, we're looking at our universities currently. You know, there's a great deal of turmoil in terms of leadership and governance and instability. And I'm sure when you are sitting there, you're watching all this, you have an opinion about it. You want to say something, Dr. Judy? You know, what do you think should be done about the challenges that face our universities today? There are many. There's a multitude of them. You know, the financial challenges and so. But I would like you to confine your comments to the leadership challenge, you know, because this seems to be a big thing, and there's a lot of worry and apprehension about this.
You know, it's interesting, Prof. Mills, because universities are just a microcosm of society.
Yeah.
Universities are reflecting what's happening in the country. Poor leadership for the wrong reasons, corruption, taking instead of giving. Leadership is about serving. It's about solving problems that are bigger than yourself, you know? So what we see playing out at our institutions is what's happening in the country. We need leaders who understand their why. Why do you choose to lead, right? Because when you look at some of these leaders not being decisive, not caring, you know, just messing up a country that is so beautiful, you realize that as institutions, we need to change the emphasis when we teach the future leaders, because we have an enviable position of having access to these young leaders. What are we saying to them? Make money, make lots of it, regardless of the values? Or are we saying anything sustainable has to be value-based? And what are those values? 1. 2, sustainability of an economy depends on how you behave as a leader to make sure that future generations inherit something that is worth inheriting. It's all doing what's right, no matter who's looking and no matter what the situation is. So we do have a responsibility as institutions of learning to inculcate that moral base, that it's not only about making money, just being morally astute, just making sure that governance is respected doesn't mean less money. It means money that is sustainable and a name that is protected, because people make lots of money and then things come out in the open and your name is gone. And maybe I'm old school. It's not so much about your money, the things you have and your degrees. It's about your name, a clean name, you know? So I think it talks to us as institutions of higher learning to say, we need to make sure we put emphasis in the right places, and we behave in the right way as leaders.
Yeah. There's a question there from Colin. It's about coaching and mentoring. So maybe I'll rephrase it, because it's a question that keeps coming up, and we receive a lot of correspondence from students and our career management services, and about this coaching and mentoring piece. Dr. Judy, how much significance do you attach to mentoring as a leader? Have you benefited from it yourself? Do you have mentees yourself? Now there's also this discussion about whether mentorship is over, it's not as important as sponsorship. We would like to wade into the discussion, using that question from Colin. He says, hello, Dr. Judy, how have coaching and mentoring impacted you?
Colin, thanks for that question. I'm old school, and those that are my age might actually say, the mentorship, coaching, sponsorship thing is a newer language. Not new, but newer for people my age. We always got guidance from our elders, whether it was mainly in the household. And I like always saying that corporate is an extension of family. The institution you meet first is that of family. So you take those values and the teachings and the ways of doing to the corporate. Of course, then you adapt to the corporate itself. And when it comes to mentorship, yes, I mentor people, but I haven't got enough time to mentor as many people as I would like and to give the attention that is required. So that's the reason, one of the reasons I wrote a book. So mentorship doesn't necessarily have to come from having weekly meetings or monthly meetings with a person. Sometimes through reading a book, because you look at someone's journey and you say, oh, this is how she solved for that. That's how I can solve for that, right? So that is the broad, what do you call it? I've forgotten the name, but the broad aspect of mentorship. Coaching, I've never had a coach, but there are people that have coaches. There are companies that pay for someone to have a coach who actually really guides you on the style that you are using, whether it's working for you or it's not working for you, and how to tweak it. Sponsorship is big, Prof. Mills. Yeah. Because in my view, a sponsor is that person who will identify opportunities and talk about why you are the right person for the opportunity when you're not in the room. Why? Because they know what you're capable of. And two, it's a matchmaking exercise for them. Maybe for their organization, you are the star that will bring something that they need, So it's all these different things, and it differs. I can't really say mentorship is overrated, because different people need different amounts of mentorship, Yeah. What I've learned, though, is that I'm big on values, and I find that the people that we gel with, because there's also chemistry in this thing. It's not just, oh, you're a leader, therefore you'll mentor me. It doesn't work like that. It's about creation of relationships. And I find that those mentees that have an alignment of a value system with myself, we tend to do better together, because it's a learning process for both the mentor and the mentee. And if you go back to FALF, we encourage peer-to-peer mentorship. We go further than encourage. We put the fellows in pods, and pods of a pea. That's the wisdom behind it, where you learn at the same level and learn from each other and collaborate in research and stuff like that. So yeah, it really depends on a person.
Yeah, thank you for that. There's a comment, a question from an anonymous attendee. Hi, Dr. Judy, Dr. and Prof. I'm a Black female professional in the mining sector. How does one make oneself to stand out in a professional environment for leadership, stroke senior management roles? I got the points made by Doctor in the beginning and also noted. Also, how do I participate in a board in order to harness my knowledge, base, and leadership?
Thanks for that question, Anonymous. Standing out in a professional environment for leadership has no magic. And people think, oh, I was taught to be feminine, so I can't show, that raise my hand and, show what I've done. But you can own your femininity and still achieve what you're supposed to achieve. What do I mean by that? When you deliver, and it matters, guys, excellence at all times, being there on time, delivering, under promise, over deliver, always try and make it work and be dependable, right? 2, once you've done all that, make sure that you understand how you are going to be measured for your performance so that the rules are clear for everyone. This is how I'll be measured. This is what shooting the lights out means. You go and shoot the lights out and come back and say, this is what I was told I'll be measured. This is what I've delivered. What is it going to take to get promotion? When you read the book, you see that the women leaders talking about how women never come to ask for a promotion, how women, when they ask for they interview for a job, they don't say, no, 100 Rand is not enough. I think I'm worth 150, but men do it all the time. So we have to start doing that as females, not in an aggressive way, in a soft, feminine, but firm way. You need to understand what it will take to be promoted. If you want a board position, go to the agents, the HR agents that seek people that are looking for board positions. Send your CV, ask for an appointment so that you sell yourself to them, because then they'll sell you to the target organization. So manage your career strategically, but actively.
All right. There's another one from Malaika Mashilwane. Prof. Dlamini, the current public procurement regime is still not biased towards women empowered. In your own view, what can government do to ensure women have equal access to public sector business opportunities?
I'm not Prof. Malaika. Nice promotion. I'm just Doctor. Thanks anyway.
We promoted you. We promoted you.
I can see that. In your view, what can government do to ensure how? Yeah,
it's about access to procurement opportunities for women in the public sector, but perhaps maybe you can extend it to the private sector, Dr. Judy.
Yeah, we're talking now about 40% procurement from women. And as I said, a ticket box exercise is just that, and it doesn't give traction. That is the challenge. Government has to have followed through. What do I mean by that? There has to be recourse. If you actually have to empower people, whether through procurement, whether through CSI, whether through employment equity, whether through ownership, government has to make sure they monitor and evaluate progress. And if there is no progress, then there has to be recourse. It's the same with the public sector. In 2011, there was this national planning, monitoring and evaluation, which was started by the late minister, may his soul rest in peace. What has happened there? Are we measuring what we are doing as government? Are we measuring if the policies are reaching the desired outcomes? So I think there is a lot that government needs to do to make sure that the brilliant policies don't remain just that, because no one is ensuring monitoring and evaluation. It's the same in business.
Dr. Judy, you're at the height of your career in terms, personally and in terms of business, and judging by the flurry of correspondence we have here and the reputation you enjoy, there's a lot of people who want to learn from you, and you're right that you can't be available for everyone, and that's why you wrote this book. And I want to encourage everyone to buy this book. There's some high-profile women featured here: Gloria Serobe, Maria Ramos. They Cindy Zilwa, everybody. Then this book, high-achieving women from whom we can learn. But perhaps if you can use this time now just to summarize the lessons you've learned as a leader, that you think the next generation of corporate executives can learn from you. So you say, what are the key lessons you've learned? 1, 2, 3, or 4, whatever. And what can the next generation of executives learn from you?
Thanks very much, Prof. Mills. I've learned a lot. And one of the things I'm so grateful for is leaving the profession. Not because I didn't enjoy it, I loved it, but because I learned so much outside the profession. And I think if I had stayed as a GP, I wouldn't know as much as I know. I wouldn't understand myself as well as I understand myself now. When you are in one career and in one profession, it's easy to judge people. At least that was my experience. When someone messes up, it's like you think they're stupid. But when you get out of your comfort zone, foreign territory, and you mess up because you knew, you become very sympathetic to people when they mess up, because it doesn't define them. You just have to find that in them that is best about them and nurture it. So that is one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, that look for goodness in people, because each one of us has that, and nurture that. Leaders are coaches. They bring the best out of people. That's our job. Our job is not to criticize people. It is to coach them to their greatness, reward them for greatness, and if they don't align in terms of values or they don't deliver, manage them effectively but with dignity. That's one thing. 2, as a leader, you are accountable. You are accountable to yourself. You are accountable to the people that you lead. As a leader, you serve for greater good. And what does that mean? The high flyers will fly. No matter what you do, they'll fly. They've got it in them to fly. The people that really need you, sadly, are the ones that are in the majority. They need support and different types of support. And as boring, as frustrating as it might seem, that is where your wins lie. That support, when you support that person to greatness, it's amazing, the loyalty that you get, but also the change that happens in the organization. So as leaders, I'm not a patient person, but that's one of the things that I've learned, that I need to have that patience and be that teacher, coach, and support for those people, and give them the tools and see how they run once you actually just stabilize their base and make sure that the environment is nourishing for them. So yeah, it's just some of the lessons. But if there was one thing that I would like to say, especially to young people, is that integrity never gets out of fashion. I don't care how lucrative the deal is. I don't care. It's just not worth it. You know, anything sustainable has integrity in it, and there's mutual respect between the parties.
All right. So we've got Esme. Esme says, please reiterate the name of the book. This is the book, right? Equal but Different, Esme. Equal but Different. Women Leaders' Life Stories, Overcoming Race, Gender, and Social Class. So you've got the title, Esme, right? And then we've got Iratilo as looking forward to reading the book. Okay, I'll come to that. Because that's converges with a question I'm going to ask later. So will this recording be made available? Yes, of course. This will be made available. I see my communications managers here, Medupi Lamula and marketing, Alison here. So they're all here. So this will be made available. It will be on our social media platforms imminently. I think tomorrow, look for it. Even though I put pressure to look for it tomorrow, right? Your career, Doctor, it's as prestigious, it's been an illustrious career. What are the highlights? What are the regrets?
I don't do regrets, Prof. Mills. I don't do regrets. I don't regret anything. The mistakes I've made, the people I've met that taught me a few things about life, I don't regret, because it's made me the person that I am. All the experiences matter. So I'm just grateful that I'm here and I can still serve, and I'm privileged, quite frankly. So no, I don't have regrets. I failed and learned sometimes and didn't learn at other times, but more importantly, move on, So no, I don't have regrets.
Yeah. And the highlights?
Wow.
There are many.
There are so many. And I know it depends what we're talking in terms of highlights. Is it personal highlights? My kids. Best thing in the world? My grandkids. I mean, in terms of career, I've been lucky to have these many different careers, and I've learned so much from people. And being a GP Mlazi was one of the best things I ever did, if not the best thing, because it was the emotional return was priceless. Yes, I made money, but more importantly, I was part of a family. Venturing out into business, I've learned so much and grown as a person. Writing the books that I've written, the last one being The Doctor of Hearts, has actually exposed me to so many beautiful people, and I've grown from that. So I've just, the Future Nation schools that my husband and I started, when you feel like you're serving a purpose, that's how I feel.
Yeah. Just talk a bit about the project you've started with your husband. In terms of the school, what prompted that? I know there's a huge crisis in terms of public education, school education in South Africa. So, what do you seek to achieve? It's targeted at low income. What do you seek to achieve through this project?
It's lower middle class target. And it's actually quite a roundabout way of answering it, because my husband and I have always been involved in education, more him than myself. Mainly for me, it's been bursaries to students that come from poor backgrounds. But our late son, was very keen on education. Him and his friends started some organization. They were looking at township schools. And when he passed on very young at 27, I just remember thinking, you know, he had no kids yet. He wasn't married, but we just wanted something in his name. We wanted something that would be an extension of what he would have done had he lived. And education seemed like the right thing. At the time, we wanted to donate a school to government to run it, but have an agreement, an MOA, if you like, to make sure that it's run around the ethos that we believe in. And it's a long story to explain why that didn't happen. But then we realized that, you know what, we've always wanted to take our kids to a school that taught them to be proud Africans, to actually be confident and chart their own way in life. And we didn't quite get it, in spite of taking them to the most expensive schools, or at least we didn't think their Africanness was celebrated. We didn't think the culture that they came from was embraced. We thought they were assimilated to be these pseudo-Europeans. And so we thought there's a way of addressing this. It might be a drop in the ocean, but you know, doing something makes a difference. So what do we seek to achieve? We want to nurture confident African leaders who are project solution-based, right? Who look for solutions and know that they have it in them to be the solutions that they are looking for, rather than asking for a job, looking to government to do this or that person. The answers are within you. All we do is to give you the tools as a school to be that amazing person that you were born to be. So I know it's a long way of answering the question, but it's the truth.
Yeah, well, we're almost there, Dr. Judy. It's been a long stretch. We have 8 minutes, so if you can bear with us for another 8 minutes. There's a question from Vuyo. You know, how do we inculcate a growth mindset to young people, especially in a country with so much inequality in our education system and the communities we come from?
That's a very good question. And, you know, when you have huge problems, and when you look at them as those huge problems, you never come up with solutions. And I always say, start where you are, right? Imagine if each and every one of us told whatever child you are exposed to that you are destined for greatness. We supported them, buying and giving them a book that will tell them about the greatness potential that they have, and support in any way. Sometimes it might be a bursary. Sometimes it might be a stipend for someone who's at university but comes from a poor family, but not poor enough to get NSFAS. So everyone, I believe, who's on this call has a privilege, is a privileged person. How are you using that privilege to make the change you want to see, to make this world better than you found it? So it's all up to us. And I really feel, please don't get overwhelmed with the mess that we find ourselves in. Try and just chisel one problem at a time where you are.
Yeah, that's inspirational stuff. So you work very hard. You're very busy. How do you relax? How do you relax? You know, you're an extraordinarily busy woman and leader. How do you relax?
You know, Friday evening, don't call me to speak or anything. I just chill. Watch a movie, anything but work. So that's one side of things. We take holidays, you know, we take holidays. Yes, we work a bit during holidays, but you know, when we are in a holiday environment, even the work that you do, you actually cut down a bit. So, and I really take good care of myself. Exercise regime, which is amazing for relaxing the mind and also building strength in your body. So I always say that we need to invest in our body, mind, and soul. And soul, it depends on what you believe in. If it's church, you talk to your God, whatever thing that actually makes you in touch with your soul, because we are soulful beings.
Yeah. Dr. Judy, you know, you gave me 3 books, and I'm showcasing this one, but there's another one which I left in my study at home. The Doctor of Hearts, and you know, Bongani Mayosi, Prof. Bongani Mayosi, whom I had the pleasure to work with, and you know him, you knew him very, very well, better than most of us. If you are to reflect on his legacy, you know, you mentioned him earlier in this discussion. If you are to reflect on his legacy, how would you characterize it? What South Africans can learn from his legacy?
Yeah, Prof. Mayosi was a special human being. He never believed in complaining, and he never believed that there were no solutions. Every problem in his mind had a solution. He's the type of person, and he was a true African. He's the type of person who said, why is clinical trial research not done in this country, in the continent? And they would be like, well, there's no ethics, what do you call them, research ethics offices? Yes, he would start one. He went throughout the continent, starting offices to make sure that clinical trials can be conducted. He started IMPI trial that looked at pericarditis, TB, pericarditis, HIV, and so forth. And that trial was by Africans, for Africans in Africa. It was a multi-country clinical trial. 50% of the work was done before you got any funding. So when I say, be the change you want to see, that is the legacy of Prof. Bongani Mayosi. The people that he worked with in that trial, it's continuing to a different phase. Why? Because his legacy lives in all those people that he trained, that he empowered, that he believed in. He had quite a few quotes that he lived by. Lift as you rise. And he really lifted as he rose. Yeah.
All right. All right, Dr. Judy, last question, and then we conclude. And I'm going back to your, to your beginning, your parents, Babu Thomas Dlamini.
Yes.
Your late parents, and you've achieved so much in your personally and in terms of what you've sought to to fulfill in terms of a career. And I'm just trying to figure out what they would say, what do they say? Your dad died, I think we were doing matric. So what do they say today? What do they say today?
Thanks for all those kind words about what I've achieved. I mean, I feel like I'm still in a journey with a lot to learn and a lot to give. But my dad, I think he completely believed in me, I remember he used to say, when I close my eyes, I see you graduating, So my dad knew I would become what I intended to become. My mother believed in me, and she was lucky to see me graduate. Well, I didn't go to the graduation because of the apartheid, whatever, but I became a doctor. She came to my practice. She saw that, her daughter, and she was so proud, embarrassingly so. And she came to my graduation at Wits, right? So she lived to see the fruits of her toil. So they would be grateful. They were very humble people and very religious. Obviously, I'm spiritual, but not as religious. But so they are the type of people that would just kneel and pray and say, thank you, God.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. That's how we come to the end of this afternoon's conversation with our guest, Dr. Judy Dlamini, Chancellor of the University of the Witwatersrand, founder and chairperson of the Mbekani Group. Thanks, Judy, for sharing with us such fascinating, enriching, instructive, powerful insights, and thanks for your leadership and service to our country. In closing, I'd like to thank everyone in the audience who attended and participated in this event. I'd like to thank, in particular, my colleagues at WBS who've worked behind the scenes to make this event a reality. Jatin Carson, Alison Gaylard, Medupi Lamula, Tembe Rashachuayo, Ikeleng Ramayema, and Rihani Makama. And from your office, Dr. Judy, I'd like to thank Mpumi Machola.
Yes, thank you.
I give our full regards to Mpumi for the cooperation. And thank you, everyone, and good evening, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Prof. And thanks to the WBS. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Bye.